All right, thanks so much. So yeah, flaming poo and the human response. There's going to be some emojis in this talk, so just a heads up on that. A little bit about me. My name is Jason Hand. Thank you for the awesome introduction. I am the DevOps evangelist at VictorOps. Follow me on Twitter. A little bit about VictorOps. We're just an incident management platform. If you want to know more about it, talk to myself or Aaron over here at the table when we get to a break. But otherwise, let's get right into it. So one of the things that I talk about a lot is system outages and incidents and just sort of the fact that things just go kind of So I'm guessing each of you, your heart jumped just like a little bit, right? No, if you didn't, then you might be experiencing burnout, and you may want to have somebody, help you with that. We'll have an open space or something. But the fact is that growing up in the 80s and the 90s, we learned pretty quickly that stuff breaks, and we don't always know why, and we don't always know why they start working again. We were able to just sort of jiggle the handle, the wire or whatever, but eventually things just start working, all right? And this is something we can maybe still do with our parents, kind of like Jill mentioned. Have you tried rebooting it or pressing the power button or whatever? But that's not really the world we live in anymore, right? We're kind of in the future. It's a little hard to see there, but we don't have hoverboards, but we're certainly advanced past blowing into cartridges to fix things. But the point is that shit will break. Sorry for the language. I feel like Nathan Harvey paved the way yesterday, so but yeah, stuff's going to break, right? Like, that's just part of it. And eventually, somebody's got to respond to that. Somebody's got to go in and, in a very reactive mode, go in and try to understand what's broken, try to fix it as quickly as possible and get things going, right? And at the end here, it's a little difficult to see. This is our monkey brain. But once we've restored services, we fixed whatever problem was, we start to think, I don't really like how that happened. I don't really like the fact that happened at all. And so we go out and we do these things called root cause analysis. And in a lot of cases, they end up, being somebody just shaking down teams and trying to understand what went wrong and who do I fire. And, so they go in there and they do these root cause analysis. And I'm going to talk a little bit about root cause analysis because I definitely have some thoughts and feels about it, especially with this one here when it comes to applying the 5 whys. John, he talked about it a little bit yesterday. John Allspaw is sort of one of the leading thought leaders, I guess you'd say, out there, kind of a proponent against the 5 whys. And I totally subscribe to this. I was taught the 5 whys in college, and then I worked for a manufacturing company, and this is what we did when something went wrong. This is what was required in a lot of cases. We were trained and certified on doing this type of analysis to understand when it went wrong, and at the end of the day, we would come up with a corrective action, and this is what we'd rolled out, and we checked that box, and everybody seemed to be happy. But then, inevitably, something very similar would happen again. So I want to talk a little bit about complicated systems, complex systems. John mentioned it. Chris mentioned it a little bit. This picture, I think, is a pretty good illustration of something that I feel is complicated. Given enough time and energy, we can make sense of everything that's going on here. We can break it down, we can put it back together. There are known unknowns, but it is still knowable. It just takes a little bit of effort. That's a complicated system. And when I say system, I'm not necessarily talking about the technology aspect. I just mean systems in general. So that's complicated. Another example I use, this is me. Back in the day, I used to race stock cars. When I lived up in Indianapolis. Everybody in Indianapolis races. I don't know if you know that. But this car here, it's a car, but it's got a truck body on it. This, to me, is complicated. I could break this down. I had to understand every moving component of this vehicle in order to control it on the track. And I knew exactly everything, every nut and bolt on that thing. I understood what my inputs did to its outputs. Okay, so it's complicated, but it was something I could understand. Now, complex is something a little bit different, something a little bit beyond that. It contains these unknown unknowns. And so what I think then is that what if I take my complicated machine and I put it out on a track with all these variables that are outside of my control that just sort of pop up randomly or just sort of exist that I didn't realize they existed. So wind condition, track conditions, heat, obstacles on the road or obstacles on the track, other humans and the cognitive problems that they're dealing with. Suddenly, a big wreck can just spark out of nowhere, a disaster. That's what happens in a complex environment. Things just sort of happen. You don't understand why. John had mentioned the Cynefin Framework. Chris had brought it up too, and I hope there's an open space on it at some point today. But the Cynefin Framework does a really good job of sort of helping us understand the different parts of a system. So I'm going to go through it real quickly. This is something definitely could be talked about all day long, but I'm not going to take the time to do that. But I'll go through each of the 4 domains because I think they're important to just touch on. The first one is obvious. This is where the relationships between cause and effect, they are obvious. You can understand what that first domino is. You could probably get to a root cause. That can happen in something like manufacturing. That can happen in simple systems. And there can be a quote-unquote best practice. We use that term a lot, best practices. But honestly, there can't be best practices with everything that we do, especially in complex environments. But in the obvious domain, you certainly can. And in the complicated, this is where we start to build the systems that we make. They are either complicated or complex. The relationships between cause and effect require analysis, investigation, maybe bringing in some expert knowledge. And when something goes wrong, we have to sense, then analyze, and then respond. And then we have these good practices. So, things are knowable but unfamiliar. Cause and effect is not apparent. And there may be more than one right answer. So that's starting to look more like the systems that we're building. And then there's complex, okay, which takes it even further. And the relationships between cause and effect can only be understood in retrospective. That's why we do postmortems. That's why we do things after the fact. We have to go back and analyze what took place because that's honestly the only way we'll truly get to the bottom of it and know what's going on. And then we probe, we sense, and respond. And then, of course, occasionally things slip into the chaotic domain. And what you want to do when you get into the chaotic domain is just get out of the chaotic domain as fast as possible. So that's why you act, then you sense, and then respond. Things are very novel. Things are just chaotic. So those are 4 of the 5. There's also a middle section of disorder. But do an open space later today. Chris promised me he'll run that, even though I won't be able to join you. Because this is kind of fascinating stuff, and I think it's really important to help us understand what we're doing. So the thing about this Cynefin framework and understanding complex systems is it's brought me to this. There isn't a root cause. Not in a complicated or a complex system. Maybe in an obvious or simple system. What there are is contributing factors. There's a lot of stuff that's going on in our systems. Things we don't even know as part of our systems. Just the users alone and their unknown behavior is going to cause some really odd stuff going on that we just couldn't have possibly predicted or known about. So contributing factors, understanding what's going on. And that includes the human piece too, which is a big part of this talk. Okay, so switching gears here. The new model, right? This is the DevOps. Everybody's all excited about the DevOps. It brings new hope for the things. We've taken the stuff we learned from Agile software development, we've applied it to the infrastructure, and now we're taking DevOps well beyond that. I hope you've heard the message that DevOps is not just about developers and operations. It's not even really just about the technology teams. It's about the entire organization and changing the way that we look at how we do work and trying to get people to reach across the aisle or build bridges and tear down the silos, tear down the walls, all those types of things. So this is the new model, but along with the new model, we've switched from sort of just going at a pace that makes sense to going faster and faster. Last summer at Velocity, New York, many of you know Pete Cheslock. He gave an awesome talk. And one of the things he said, I don't know if you can read it, but I'll read it for you. We know that engineers build better systems when they support those systems. And there are a lot of people in the audience who were kind of like this. Put the devs on call? Are you sure that's the best? You sure that's the best thing? Do we want developers really having access to our infrastructure? And good reason. I mean, most of us as operations people, this is our stuff. Be careful. We're not sure we really trust you to be in there. And the reason is because we know that these are our toys. These are our things. And when you start giving the developers your toys, things just kind of you don't know what's going to happen. And then I'm the one who's on call. I got to come back and clean up your mess. So humans, we hear a lot about humans, people, the culture. That's a big part of this whole movement, the whole DevOps thing. So of course you can't start talking about the technology and ignore the human part. It doesn't matter like what angle you're coming at, what talk you're giving. There's always the human element. And although the systems we build, they do a lot. There's a lot of automation. Things will go wrong, and the people are never going to be the cause of a problem. You can never assign a person as the cause, okay? A person should never be the root cause if you're still in that root cause mindset. A person that makes a mistake, does something, it's a learning opportunity. If they pushed a button that caused a massive outage, anybody could have pushed that button and caused a massive outage. So people are never the root cause. They may be part of what happened. They are a contributing factor to the whole story. And they're definitely, and probably more importantly, going to be part of understanding and resolving that problem and being part of the improvement process. So humans are always going to be a very, very big part of this. And I think the one of the more important things to remember is, as humans, we are fallible. We have this ability to make mistakes. And there's so much of it that just is simply because of bias. Now, bias is something that we oftentimes forget. We can't really even spot bias in ourselves. We spot bias in other people, but it's very difficult for us to stop and catch bias in ourselves. Now, I think we're getting better as people, especially with a lot of the struggles that are going on in the world, that we start to catch that. We are being a little bit biased about something. So let's talk about bias, because this is important, especially in incident management and understanding failure and trying to learn from failure. One of the big ones is just cognitive bias. We sometimes have these deviations in judgment just because we're trying to choose being really good at something, really fast at something, and being very accurate. Okay, so there's this idea of the efficiency to thoroughness trade-off. You can't be highly efficient and highly thorough at the same time. You got to be a little bit of both. Try to find a good balance. But if you switch to one or the other, then the other one's offset. Normalcy bias. This is where we believe it won't happen because it hasn't happened previously. I've never been in a really bad car wreck, and so my mind thinks, I'll never be in a really bad car wreck. That's a normalcy bias. Now, I can drive the shit out of a car, so maybe I do have an advantage there. But it's still, that right there is a normalcy bias, right? Just because I used to race cars doesn't mean I won't get into a bad wreck. There could be some idiot who comes and T-bones me. Hindsight bias. This one comes up a ton, especially when you start doing your retros. Hindsight bias is where we believe this is something we should have known. We could have detected this. If we just would have done it this way, we would have avoided this whole thing. That's a hindsight bias. And it involves counterfactuals. Counterfactuals are the wouldas, the shouldas, the couldas. And that type of language should never pop up in a retrospective about a post-incident analysis type of thing. So that's hindsight bias. And then confirmation bias, this happens to us a lot too. We create something in our mind, a model of what took place, and then we go and we back that up with support. We will find information to support anything, any claim that we want to come up with. And that comes up especially in a root cause analysis, and especially if you do a 5 whys root cause analysis, because there's 5 different, you should do your next 5 whys, have 5 different people do 5 whys and see what the result is, see what your root cause is. So these biases, they're really just mental shortcuts. They're desire paths. I know you can't see that picture very well, but you see sidewalks around different parts of town, and people are like, screw that, I'm going this way, that's faster. So that's what our mind does. And it's not intentional, it's just it's human. It's just a part of how it goes for us. And then there's the blame culture I've already talked a little bit about. This is something, how many of you feel like within your organization there is a sense of a blame, you still have a blame culture? There's always somebody at fault. Heads will roll when something goes wrong. Who do I fire? Who do I let go? That kind of language. That's the stuff that has to go away if you really want things to improve and get better. But the thing is, that's really hard. As humans, we are wired to blame. Brene Brown, she's a pretty well-known psychiatrist. She's got this wonderful quote a lot of people in the industry share. Blame is just a way for us to discharge pain and comfort. Discomfort. It is very normal for us to blame. It's also very normal for us to blame ourselves. That was my bad. I made that mistake. Won't happen again, boss. That's not okay either. That's still blame. It's still blaming ourselves. And the thing about blame, too, is that when you start to blame your operators, you start to blame the people on your team, they get really, really good at not telling you shit. They hide stuff. They think that their job is on the line. They think that something bad is going to happen to them because John last week or Tina or whoever, they got let go for making a very similar mistake. This stuff's got to change too. We want to understand how things happened. We don't care who did what. Well, now, we want to know, when we start to do these retros, we want to know who was involved, and I'll get to that a little bit later, but the more important thing is, how did this happen? Not why. Why will lead to blame. How did it happen? Because if you ask how, you'll start to understand the actual details. And the information, that's all we want. We want to make things better. How many of you feel like you're a paid professional? I should see every single hand. We're all paid, right? Does anybody not get paid for the things that you do? You're a professional. The sheriff here, my man Peyton Manning, what's he doing? Does anybody know? He's looking at game footage. He's watching last night's game or that same night's game. He's trying to understand not just where I went wrong, but what really worked well. How do I just understand what took place during tonight's game while I'm soaking my foot in a hot tub? He wants to just make things better, right? He's a paid professional. So are all of you. So are all of us. We're paid professionals. Why don't we look at things like this? Why don't we take the time to go back and evaluate what we did, both good and bad, and then look for areas of improvement for the next night's game? I was watching on the flight here from San Francisco, I was watching a movie, the new Alice in Wonderland. And I don't know, this came up in the movie, and I was like, that's a really good quote. I should add that to the deck. And I totally believe you can't change the past. You learn from it. That's all you can do. The whole movie is about Alice trying to go back in time and change the past. Everybody's trying to go back and change things. You realize you can't. All you can do is learn from it and move forward, and make things better moving forward. So the point is, these root causes, I hate them. I think they're pointless. They don't do much for you. They're just a checkbox. But learning reviews and postmortems, that's where it's at. That's where you start to understand what's going on. You do these learning reviews. I like that term better than postmortem, but most people understand what postmortems are, especially in our industry. And the point of a postmortem, I thought Nathan did a really great job yesterday pointing this out, is that we're just here to learn and improve. Okay, we want to understand the story. We want some accountability. And when I say accountability, I mean that in the truest sense. I think a lot of people will use, we've got to hold somebody accountable. They use that in the wrong way. Holding someone accountable means, tell me what happened. Give me an accurate account of what happened. Some people will say, well, we got to hold somebody accountable. What they're actually meaning is that they're responsible. And you really don't want to hold people responsible for problems in your system. We just want to understand what took place. So that's the accountability that I'm talking about. But the point is that these postmortems, we're just trying to learn and improve. And so when you set out to do your postmortem, if you've never done a postmortem, you're going to be like, all right, I'm going back to my office. We're going to start doing this for every single outage. It doesn't matter the severity level. We're going to do this. There has to be this motto that you have at the beginning of each one of them until it's just part of habit and you just understand what's going on. But we are here to learn and improve. That is it. We are not here to understand what the root cause is. We want to know what all of the contributing factors were. We want to know what the people were doing, what they were thinking, what they were seeing. But at the end of the day, I'm just here to learn and improve. So what do these postmortems look like? What do they contain? Okay. Well, you want to go all the way back to the beginning. When something goes wrong, we go back to the beginning, okay? So we go back to the start. Establish a timeline. When did your monitoring system, or whatever it is, your anomaly detection system, when did it first notice something, okay? And what time? And then, this is really important, you want to describe what went wrong, not explain. Explaining, again, will start to lead down the path of blame. Describing it is where you get the accountability. What took place? Exactly what took place and how? Then context. What can we bring in to this story? What can we bring into to help understand what went wrong? Can we bring in some graphs? Can we bring in some different links to logs? Like what helps me understand the story a little bit better? Because that's what we're trying to do. So bring in extra context. And then conversations and actions. You've probably heard a little bit about ChatOps. If you didn't already, grab a book. There's a whole bunch of ChatOps books over here at the VictorOps table for free. But the point is, during an outage, during an incident, there's conversations take place. And please tell me you're doing them in chat, not on a phone. Because if you do them on a phone, that conversation is lost. Now, I know a lot of people, you got to have a phone bridge, got to get everybody on here, all hands on. I'm not saying don't do that, but at least transcribe what's being said. Because if you don't, how are you going to go back and understand what was said and what was done? So, move it into chat, do your chat ops, and understand the conversations and actions. And then understand, what was everybody thinking and feeling? This is a big part of the understanding the bias part. You want to bring in not only the first responders, the incident commander, but support, and maybe marketing. What were they seeing on social media? What else was going on in different parts of the company that is actually relevant to improving our situation? This goes back to the diversity and bringing in more and more people to help understand the bigger story, the greater story. And then from that, you start to develop some actionable items. You can follow, the SMART sort of model here of specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, timely. But the main thing, I should have made it the bigger font here, is that we're looking for small incremental improvements. We're not trying to boil the ocean. We're not trying to solve all of our problems. We're not trying to re-engineer an entire system from scratch. We're looking for ways to make this a little bit better so that when tomorrow comes and something very similar happens, or maybe the exact same thing happens, it has less of an impact on our systems and our IT. But you might say, well, okay, I'll try that, but how do you even know if it's really working? I mean, how do we like kind of verify, what's the ROI on doing this type of thing? Every year, this has already been brought up a few times, but every year Puppet puts out the State of DevOps report, and it's awesome. It gets better every single year. This year, I love it because it starts to put some real numbers. There's a formula in there to understanding the cost of downtime. And the main thing that I love is that they talk a lot about the mean time to recover. The mean time to recover, mean time to repair. And how high-functioning organizations out there have focused on reducing that MTTR. That's how they're getting really good. That's how they go from horse to unicorn. That's how they have highly available systems. They focused on the response and being really, really good at responding to problems rather than trying to engineer those problems out of their systems. A lot of us are like, no, we'll make it so that doesn't happen. Well, that's not possible. You just got to get really good at responding and fixing things. So MTTA, that's mean time to acknowledge, mean time to recover. Those are two metrics right there that will tell you if this is working. If your postmortems and your learning reviews are working, you should see something like this. This is a report out of VictorOps. I think it's of VictorOps actually, and you can see, something happens. And it doesn't matter the severity of the incident. We go in and we treat it as it's a major problem, because we want to get really rehearsed. And you can see something happened over here. We got pretty good that week about looking at things, not only acknowledging them, but recovering from them very, very fast, in about 2 minutes. Another thing is the volume of actionable alerts. Yesterday we had an open space about sort of on-call stuff, and actionable alerts was something that came up. If you're getting paged in the middle of the night and your phone's just blowing up on the nightstand, but you can't do anything about those things, either you don't have access into the systems, or you don't have access to some sort of run book that can tell you how to triage this thing and understand what's going on, that's an unactionable alert or an inactionable alert. And what it does, it leads to all kinds of things. It leads to you eventually just start ignoring those alerts. This thing goes off every night. I don't have to do anything about it. World doesn't end. Whatever, I'll leave it alone. Or you get worse, you get burnt out. You get to a point where you, fuck it, I'm out. I'm not doing this anymore because this happens all the time. So, this is another report. What is our noisiest reports? What should we be going in and actually trying to improve on? Or at least, this EBS alarm's going off all of the time. Is that really a problem? Should we actually be alerting on that? Can we get rid of it? So looking for your actionable alerts and making sure that some people, when they get paged, they're paged in a humane way. This is something that needs somebody has attention on it. They need to fix it. But if it's not important, then don't page me. I like this quote. I couldn't figure out where it came from, but I love it. Failure in a complex system is inevitable, which is exactly why learning from it is so critical. So print this out. Put it on a poster. Send this around, because that's the thing. The systems we're building are extremely complex, and something's going to go wrong eventually. So just being able to position yourself where you can learn from that, learn from not only the problems, but your response. What did your team do when they responded to this problem? How did they behave there? And how can we do better? Can we practice that? Netflix is notorious for Chaos Monkey. And the point of that is to inject failure into their systems and then get the team to just swarm to that problem and fix it very quickly. And then get back to business as usual. And then that becomes a sort of repetitive behavior, just becomes natural. You just get really, really good at responding to problems and fixing them, and then you just move on with your day. And the big part of this is that all of this is continuous. Okay, when it comes to DevOps, a lot of cases, especially depending on the audience I'm speaking to, I stop using the word DevOps because it's just a shiny object for people to get distracted with. And so I'll just say DevOps is really nothing more than just continuous improvement. And you'll get your CI, your CD, all the automation, monitor, all that stuff. Those are going to be byproducts of just this laser focus on continually improving everything that you do. And baby steps. Our man here, Bob, loved baby steps. But that's, to me, that's the right mindset. We're not trying to, again, like redesign everything from the ground up. We're not trying to boil the water. We're just kind of come up with ways that are slightly going to make the needle move in a positive direction every time. We're looking for teeny tiny action items. You can't see this here, but the muscle. You guys remember the muscle men, the little action figures? Teeny tiny little action figures, but teeny tiny little action items. That's what we're after. What's something that's small, something that we can implement maybe tomorrow that's going to make the situation just a little bit better. And we'll just keep doing that. And this is something that is ongoing, okay? That's what continuous means. This isn't a project that you start and stop, which is another problem with a lot of companies and a lot of especially senior management. Every single thing to them is a project. We're going to start it here, and there's going to be an end date, and then we'll move on to something else. And they think that that's what you can do with DevOps too, which is a shame. So I hope you take that back to your managers and say, this isn't a thing that you start and stop. It's continuous improvement. It's continuous, ongoing, forever, forever. So wrapping up here, a lot of this, especially with DevOps, you know, we hear break down the silos, look for areas to remove bottlenecks, bad processes. That's why we do value stream mapping, all that kind of stuff. We're trying to find ways to knock down these barriers constantly. All right? There's a lot of people in the world trying to build walls. We like to tear them down. And you're never finished with continuous improvement. I don't know why that doesn't make sense to a lot of people, but it's something you just kind of keep doing. And we're never finished transforming the way we deliver and support software. Agile came along, 20 years ago almost or something. Now we've sort of evolved since then. There will be something that comes after DevOps. We haven't figured out what it's going to be called yet. But this is an evolving thing. And we're always trying to find ways to transform it and make it better. Continuous. I don't know if there's a theme here. I don't know if you guys have figured this out. Is anybody feeling like, I don't know, I like this, I've drank the Kool-Aid, Jay, but I'm not sure this is going to work in my company. I don't know if it's possible. There's people in my company who are like, they're very conservative mindset about how you manage things, about what you're supposed to do. They have the MBA. We just go to DevOpsDays. They don't feel like it's possible. Well, I told you I was watching that movie on the plane over here, the Alice in Wonderland movie, and another great quote popped up. One of my favorite ones, I think. The only way to achieve the impossible is to believe it is possible. So as much as you may be like totally in love with the concepts, the ideas, the principles behind DevOps, and the things that all of us are telling you here today, it is possible. I just came in from, well, many of us came from the DevOps Enterprise Summit. That right there is nothing but 3 or 4 days of companies who you would believe would say, no, that's not possible. We're Capital One. We're Target. We're Starbucks. We're big. We can't do that kind of stuff. They are. They are. It is possible. So I don't care who you work for. This stuff is possible. Everybody else, not everybody, lots of people have figured out it is possible. So I urge you to go back, do what you can, to start making incremental improvements. Start treating your systems and the problems that they have very seriously. Because you're going to keep making more stuff. You're going to keep building more complexity into your systems, and they're going to have failures. There's going to be problems. And so how are you going to deal with that? How are you going to get better at responding to those problems so that you can continuously improve. You don't want to be the next Blockbuster. You don't want to be the next AOL. You don't want to be the next Borders. Those companies don't exist anymore because they weren't focused on learning and improving and trying to be the next thing. And they got disrupted, and they're no longer with us. Rest in peace. But we don't have to be that way. We can actually make sure that we are the driving force. We are the IT engine within an organization. We can be the innovators to make sure that our company does succeed. And if you don't care if your company doesn't succeed, you might not really be in the job that's right for you. That's really all I got. I appreciate James and all the other organizers having me out here to Nashville. I love Nashville. I grew up in Indianapolis. Spent a lot of time down here. It's been a pleasure to be here and be part of your first DevOps Days. Kudos and hat tip to the entire team. You've done a great job. That's all I got. Thank you very much.